The dinosaur sprang out of the black abyss like a jack-in-the-box. It was beyond understanding how the hell it had gotten into the belly of a giant rusty tanker, lying on the deserted shore of a dried-up sea since time immemorial, but one could expect such things to happen in this area. Solomon barely dodged the massive jaws snapping close to his neck. The dinosaur was small, a little taller than a man, but it made up for its lack of size with devilish agility. Solomon tore the pistol from holster, performing a pirouette worthy of Barcelona's greatest matadors. The beast whizzed past, running a dozen more steps on inertia, and turned around, blasting the sand with its big claws. Its vertical pupil eyes stared at Solomon with that glassy expression that only reptiles have. Solomon did not wait for another attack. Raising the gun, he fired the entire clip into the dinosaur, half into the body, half into the head of already falling predator. He had read somewhere that these creatures were tough, but 16 bullets would be enough for anyone. The mighty hind legs scraped the sand one last time, and the beast fell silent. Solomon reloaded the gun and looked at his watch. All 4 dials showed the same time. That was good. This meant that the local temporal field was stable, despite the recent rain. However, clouds began forming in the west, far above the horizon. It was time to return to the shelter. The forecast for the evening and the next couple of days was not very favorable. Solomon walked along the barely visible path between the dunes and pondered the results of his outing. Not about the stupid run-in with the poor Jurassic creature, of course, but about mapping the temporal changes. The picture was disappointing. It was clear that after each storm, each rain, new areas of altered time appeared, and this disintegration of reality went farther and farther into the past, as demonstrated by the clash with the dinosaur. Somewhere beyond the horizon, far to the north, a giant temporal vortex was churning, shimmering, breathing, the result of a failed experiment that had destroyed civilization and turned the Earth into a crazy mixture of randomly shifting pieces of the past. A neutral time field protected the few safe havens from these changes, but no one understood the physical meaning of what was happening. Few people were even interested in it anymore. The fall of civilization contributes to the decline of interest in scientific knowledge. Solomon was one of the very few who were still trying to figure out what had happened. The dunes ended and the path turned eastward, skirting the ruins of a medieval city, a legacy of the catastrophe's first months, when the temporal vortex flywheel had not yet gained momentum and reality was tipping back in time within human history. It was dangerous to go into those ruins. The accumulated rainwater could well pour down from the remains of the roofs. After Solomon left the ruins behind, the path turned south again. The way to the shelter was almost straight ahead, slanting across a large field. It had once been farmland, but now it was a dusty wasteland, littered with the rotted remains of giant ferns, the aftermath of the last fall's rain. Occasionally, Solomon had to walk around some bizarre artifact, like a rusted tank that had been half turned into the ancient Egyptian chariot, something clearly fit the times of the pharaohs. Next to the hybrid lay a skeleton in scraps of camouflage, pinned to the ground with the Viking spear. Solomon grinned. It was bad luck for the soldier to be caught in a downpour and run into some guys with similar luck. By some miracle, however, they had survived and got away from here. There were no other skeletons nearby. By now, they could be just like that dinosaur, hiding in ravines and ruins in search of prey. He smiled at a sudden funny thought. That fanged beast could very well be one of them. If you get caught in a heavy downpour, you can even get out of it as a trilobite, let alone a dinosaur. Solomon was never much into the evolutionary process, but after what happened to his family, it was still half an hour's walk to the shelter when Solomon's consciousness was suddenly alerted by a subtle change in the surroundings. All his senses were instantly heightened. He quickly realized what was happening. The wind had changed and increased, and the first purple clouds ran across the sky, occasionally punctuated by emerald green sparks. The reign of time was coming. Solomon dropped the backpack off his shoulders and pulled out a spacious cloak that glistened with metallized fabric. Putting the backpack back on, Solomon slipped the cloak over the top of it and plugged the power cable into the connector on his battery belt. He hasn't turned on the protective temporal field generator yet, so as not to drain the batteries too early. Who knows how things would go in terms of rain? Of course, the low-powered generator of the cloak was no match for the stationary one covering the shelter. But even in case of the heaviest downpour, it would give Solomon a few extra minutes. Sometimes it's the minutes that separate disaster from salvation. He had way too clear memories about this. A sharp blade of bitterness and the sense of loss cut into his heart, but Solomon did his best to suppress those feelings. Now was not the right time for emotions. He had to get to the shelter first. When he looked back, he saw that the horizon was already hidden behind the greenish shroud of rain. Solomon touched the temporal field generator button and quickened his pace. He must get back to the shelter, back to his family. He was lucky. The clouds mostly went sideways, the rain just barely touching the path Solomon had traveled home. The cloak's temporal field had held, though he saw a rain shower, heavily charged with the temporal energy, fall on the ruins of a former chemical plant half a mile to the north. A green glow enveloped the chaos of rusted metal and mangled concrete. The outlines of the buildings started to blur and shimmer, until the gray masonry, crumbling half-collapsed towers, and the black eye sockets of medieval castle battlements began to appear in the green glow. The reign of time was changing reality again. Solomon saw only a glimpse of it all, preoccupied with one thing, making it in time. In this time-crazed world, making in time was the most crucial thing. So when he finally saw the massive steel door in the concrete dome, with the bluish sparks of the temporal field barely visible on its rusty surface, he was almost dizzy with relief. His family, as usual, greeted him with genuine joy and enthusiasm. Kyra, his wife, and both sons, Mark and Alex, jumped up and ran in circles around him, bubbling excitedly and trying to look into his eyes. The familiar light odor of the menagerie hit his nostrils. Uneaten food, fur, and bodily secretions. Solomon hugged and petted each of them as best as he could, careful not to neglect anybody. After all, they were his family, the only creatures on the planet close to him. Even if Australopithecines could not be called fully human, he will care and love them and always make it home before it rains. Even though one day they didn't make it in time.